Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and this is Explosive Concoction, the other flask skill that no one plays. So I went out of my way to kind of make an Explosive Concoction in a style that I wanted to make last League. That is the Scourge League, where there was lots of +2 sort of chests out there that you could then Scourge up and 6-link properly, and you'd have a really nice chest. There was a lot of them out there last League, and it's very easy to 6-link, right, because the corrupted, tainted stuff. I wanted to make Explosive Concoction just stacking plus levels last League, never really got around to it, but this League can manage to do that after I saw a particular Skin of the Loyal up for sale, and then stack a bit of Omni onto it, and you got yourself what is a really nice skill. So the Skin of the Loyal that I saw was +2 AoE, +2 projectiles, and then it's also got a +1 on itself, and it was up for 6 exalts, and I was like, hey, that seems like it will make an entire build. So that's what I did. Basically the rest of this character is then filled in with, I don't know, 5 to 10x worth of gear, some shit like that, and then it becomes a really successful DPS or single target skill. Now, because we start out with that Skin of the Loyal, it does of course mean that you're not going to get much stats or life in the build, since we basically are using a statless chest piece. So as you can see, a very low amount of life in the build, but the EHP is quite high, because I've still managed to squeeze in, as a Scion, an extreme amount of defensiveness. I've got a Grace, a Determination, a Defiance banner, and 80 attack block, and also Spell Suppress, almost at its cap. So in the end, it becomes a pretty thick character, and it's one of the most durable ones I've made this League, even though I've only got like 3.6k life. Doesn't really matter. I've already taken it through to wave 28 Simulacrum, which I think it can also do wave 30, but I got a bit shafted on the layout, and as you can see, doing the Fiat at the start of the video was pretty comfortable for obvious reasons. Good DPS, but I'm doing very little dying on the character. The mapping experience has been pretty good. The biggest problem is Explosive Concoction, with the setup that I've got, with the colors that I had to get for the Skin of the Loyal, doesn't really let me get more area or clear in the setup. So it's all just pure hit base. It has a lot of extra fire damage to start with, and then you scale it off gem levels. It's then got a lot of extra lightning and cold if you use a sapphire and a topaz flask. And there's no real area scaling, it's just hit damage, and I've got a little bit of area that I could get from like my helm enchant, more or less. And the previous version of Concoction I did, I think it was last League, was Ignite, and that's got a much nicer clear, but its single target is infinitely worse. This thing's got to be something like 20 million single target at its top, and you can see it even just like straight one-shots beyond bosses, and doing double beyond is pretty comfortable overall. It's just, you know, you're thick against it and everything dies instantly. Even though the single target, while amazing, the clear still leaves something to be desired. So we can't do really big screens, but, you know, we're durable enough to be able to kind of take a few hits if need be. And you can maybe see that the big one sort of weakness to the defensive setup is damage over times, because I've done nothing about that. Essentially, I've got some chaos res, but that's about it for chaos damage over time, and I don't really have any regen in the character, couldn't squeeze that in, so got some leech, got some life gain on hit, but no real sustenance against the damage over time if it comes a calling in the form of like ground effects most of the time. Either way, doesn't really matter. I've actually enjoyed having this really low life setup, and then just a huge amount of thickness on top of it has given me a taste for how people have built extremely dumb thick characters with all of the defensive setups and all that, but obviously with a really low life pool on top of that. So it keeps things still a little bit spicy, but for the most part still extremely thick, and we also get much bigger use out of your Molten Shell if you have this type of a life pool, because you're essentially doubling your effective hit pool with just Molten Shell being up. But as you can see, the single target is pretty ridiculous. Now, the reason for that is that Explosive Concoction, when you throw a flask, it hits one time, but when you throw more flasks, they can overlap. If you've got the right area or the right boss hitbox, they can overlap and all individually end up hitting the boss and the targets. And when you have one additional projectile from Tailwind and then a GMP and a greater volley, there's 10 projectiles being lobbed right on top of my face because we are point blanking. And if they all overlap, that's 10 of those projectiles all doing damage. Now I tested taking out volley and then having like hypothermia there instead, but it seemed very similar on damage and I couldn't really tell. As you can see with the shrines, it becomes pretty ethical. But yeah, I couldn't really tell what was better or worse, so if throwing more projectiles is about the same, then I'd rather do that because there's just a bit better capacity for hitting more targets, and as well as that, a bit more life gain on hit, mana gain on hit, some shit like that. I don't know, it feels better to throw more projectiles overall, even though I was testing with less. Obviously the play would be awakened greater multiple projectiles, but that is very expensive. And yeah, the top end on this character can still go quite a bit higher, I think. If we level a couple more times, I'm only level 92, level a couple more times and then get awakened gems, basically just spend 50x upgrading it with gems and shit. We're probably doubling our damage, and it's already fairly stupid, as you can see. So this isn't really a character that I could encourage you to replicate, I suppose, because the chest is nigh unattainable, even though what I'm looking at was a 6 exalt chest, and that's good enough to enable an entire game beater comfortably. You kind of have to do that for yourselves a lot of the time, and that is just see gaps in the market, things that are pretty damn powerful, and see how you can utilize them before someone else gets to them, because now that I've taken that chest and shone a light on it, obviously you can't get really the same chest anywhere near as easily. So here's a good example of the wave 20 simulacrum. So we got to like wave 28 and pretty much only died to that little fucking choke point doorway where I was getting stuck. I just need to grab some phasing flask and probably be able to do a nice clean wave 30, I think, which will be ridiculous for a character with 3k life and a fairly underused skill. In any case, I'll show you how it's built, but it's pretty obviously just get some Omni and shit like that and win. So here we are with level 92, the other Concoction, as we all know. Poison's Concoction, pretty good, pretty well played, and explosive, not too many people do. So it is, there's not really that much to say. It's an Omni build. I mean, I was going to allow myself 2 or 3 uses throughout the league because it is just absurd and way over the top and enables too many things. But in this case, yeah, I figured it'd be worth doing just to make Explosive Concoction about as good as possible, because I really wanted to utilize this chest piece and make a nice concoction build since last league, and I missed out on doing it during Scourge when we could have done some +4 chests with many different results. So went ahead this league and then forced a bit of Omni. If you're still unfamiliar with how omniscience works, basically it turns all of your stats into something called omniscience. So we have 0 stats, but we do stack a lot of stats because they turn into omniscience, which then turns into penetration and all res. So in this case, currently I have 1500 omniscience, so that's 150 elemental pen and 150 all res. So you don't really have to get resists in your gear, and you don't need to get any additional sources of penetration and all of that. So you can see we built kind of thick, decent amount of armor, decent amount of evasion, and 80% attack block, as well as that spell suppress at 96. It goes to 99 if I just divine these 2 items, and then I'm 1% off, and that's a little bit sad, but is what it is. So the chest piece is Skin of the Loyal, +2 AoE, +2 proj. When I was just browsing for these implicits, there were 2 or 3 of these up at the time for 6 exalts, 8 exalts, and some other price that wasn't being bought, obviously. And no one was buying them, so I thought, hey, that's a good opportunity for me to go for it. And they are pretty niche colors, so I thought, what could I do with these colors? I think I could fit an Explosive Concoction, and turns out, yes, you can. I ideally think would have had a blue socket for some Trinity action still, and then if I had Trinity, I would have been able to not do Omniscience, and that's basically why I went into the Amulet. Because of these colors, I can't possibly do 1 elemental penetration with this skill that needs all 3 types, basically, and I can't do Trinity, so I think I need to do an Omni build with it, and that's why we did it. So as you can see, with the chest, with an Empower, we are looking at a level 30 concoction, and an attack with this much damage is pretty absurd. So this type of flat damage is really kind of out of line for an attack-based skill, though it's entirely possible for like spells to hit this type of beginning damage. An attack that then gets scaled with like really good multipliers and gear and all that becomes pretty silly. So 2.6 to 4,000 added fire, that's always going to happen. And then the added cold and the lightning, still pretty big, but it consumes charges of flasks. And sometimes that does become a bit of an issue. Like near the end of Maven, I ran out of Topaz and Sapphire, and on a couple of Simulacrum waves I was starting to run out, because it does consume your charges. So these 2 flasks, purely cosmetic, I never press them, and as you can see, you just start to, after a few attacks, go down on your charges. It's not really that big a deal because it still deals insane amounts of damage even once it's gone, but obviously you're not getting the maximum effect anymore. So the sockets here are greater multiple projectiles, greater volley, so that's why we fire 10 concoctions, and then using inspiration at level 21 and then combined with the +1 means that if I use the mastery, we get 6% more per inspiration since it's level 25. Early damage with attacks, can get a woke 1 there instead, and then empower level 4, and that's how we get level 30 concoction. Then have just gear that has some stats and some defensive shit and some offensive shit. Got Intimidate on gloves. Did want Rage, but kind of have to do this, I think. Brittle, which isn't always happening, but on some bosses I'm definitely trying to apply the Brittle before attacking, but that fills out my crit. I'm at something like 70, 75 crit, fully buffed, before Brittle goes up, and that's purely on single target. And then, yeah, reuse the belt from before, grabbed some rings with some early damage attacks, and got this one fairly cheap, 100C fracture I think it was, and then just finished off with some essences. And the other reason I wanted to build the way I built this way, plenty of like defense and stuff, is because I got this shield from Rog like 3 weeks ago maybe, and it's just been sitting there doing nothing, but it's got a lot of defense on it. So it's got a lot of block, got a lot of suppress, and it's got ailment avoid, and I'm 100% ailment immune as well. And so I thought I really wanted to utilize this shield on some sort of character that has, you know, a potential for good damage, so probably an Omni build, and that's what I did. So we've got ailment avoid at 100% thanks to this shield, the boots that have 29% and then another 20, and also the passives over here. So starts out with 40 block. Need to divine that for a little bit better. Starts out with 40 block, all that suppress, which I've got up to 96 as I mentioned. All of this block made me just kind of spec into a bunch of block, and also take the Gladiator Forbidden Flesh. These were like 20 CP, so they're cheap as fuck, but the main thing I went for was Berserker and Deadeye, and then I was just making a choice between whatever else I could get, and felt like Gladiator was just filling out the defenses value-wise a bit more than anything else. But I think Champion was a good choice. I think Slayer was a good choice. Could have gone Jug, but I fixed accuracy and pretty much all the defensive things that Jug would have otherwise done. Pathfinder, Raider, very good choices, but anything on the Ranger side in Ascendant is like 50 exalts or some shit, so just not allowed to do those. So we've got Berserker for some rage, and that lets me press Berserk every now and again. Deadeye for pretty much everything on it. Effective Mark, additional Proj, Tailwind, some good stuff there. And then the passive tree is, went under a few refinements, and to begin with I was taking life and all that, but it's just hard to fit in all this life when you're doing everything else, so I thought, fuck it, I'll just go defensive and not need that life, and then basically never get hit. So we've got 80 block, 70 evasion, and a bunch of armor and molten shell when need be. So ultimately, not dying almost ever, even with a low amount of life. Otherwise, we get some block, we get some mark, cull, some stats, some crit, plus 3 supports, 50 ailments. The gladiator got just triple multi because pretty easy to get good triple multis when you're using a skill with all 3 elements: fire, cold, elemental. Using a timeless jewel here, lethal pride, just for some more stats. So 5 strength, that does nothing. 5 strength, 5 double, regen 1 life, 20 armor. So the baseline is pretty much like 10 strength and 5 double. I managed to roll like 3 of these with 80 divine orbs, and this one was just the best one that gave a little bit extra. I then picked up a Watcher's Eye with crit multi for precision. Those are pretty cheap, but if you also want something extra from any of our other auras, I grabbed the suppress for grace, which was I think 5 exalts at the time, and that allowed me to just shave 2 points off my tree. So bit of a saving there. And then my next 2 points here are absolutely massive. They will give me like, I don't know, another 20% more damage or some shit. Because as you can tell from the tree maybe, got almost no actual percent damage on the tree, and getting more is good. And then also attack speed at the same time. So hitting level 94 should increase output by a good chunk. But yeah, don't know what else to say. It's an Omni build, explosive concoction. Pretty damn good. I think you can definitely build it without this chest and without Omni. You'll be looking at building it quite a different way, and honestly, if I was going to do it again, or to begin with, I was going to do it without crystallized omniscience and do an Inquisitor, because we can then just stack and ignore Ellie Res, and it would have still been pretty good, but I can't keep reusing Inquisitor that often, so I'll reuse Omni one more time instead in a proper build. Still kind of a meme build, but a bit more of a proper build. So then we've got Molten Shell, Assassin Mark, Mark on hit, Blood Rage, and Phantasmal Ancestral Protector, just a bit of extra attack speed, Dash, Precision 21, Grace 21, Determination, Berserk, very rarely pressed, faster attacks, Inspiration Shield Charge, and Defiance Banner. Mana's a bit sketchy, and we do need to take Charisma to fit all of the things in, and also the Precision Aura to fit all of that in too. That's about it. Pretty crazy build. Does a lot of damage, has very little life, very good defense, and crushed endgame. Did a flawless Tulip Breachstone. Gonna go for a wave 30 Simulacrum some point today, and otherwise just farm all kinds of other endgame. So I hope you guys liked my little example of some dumb shit. Essentially, it's stuff I've been doing my entire PoE career. You look at stuff that is feeling like it's undervalued, underutilized, and then you make a build around it. And then after someone else has done that, and you know, it's become more popular, that shit gets more expensive and more obvious, and it becomes a little less attainable. So got to look for those little diamonds in the rough. And there it is. And I'm sure there's plenty more out there. Plenty of skills viable right now. Omni can make anything viable. Plenty of underutilized items and corruptions and all that. Just got to find the right stuff. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.